Welcome back to our series of transition talks from the Farm Forward Conference. In this episode, we hear from Tommy Oesch of Swisslane Farms in Michigan as he shared his journey from junior partner to senior leader and how he and his partners are now thinking about how to prepare for the next generation of dairy farms and their family. All this and more here today on the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. Welcome to the Uplevel Dairy Podcast. This is the podcast for dairy producers and professionals who are committed to moving our industry forward. I'm Peggy Coffeen, and each week we bring you the leaders, the lessons, and real-world stories from the people who have built the dairy business we know today and those who are shaping its future. Join us on the journey by following Uplevel Dairy on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and subscribe at upleveldairy.com to get new episodes and our Dairy Insights blogs right in your inbox. So I'm calling these transition talks. So this is just a little Q&A to get to know some of these experts in their fields. And one of those experts is a dairyman himself who has gone through a multi-generational family farm transition and also now preparing for what looks like could be the next generation coming in. So we will talk for about 20 minutes. Then we will have Steve, Christy, and Will up here. And then what we'll do is take a little break. And then we will have an hour-long session panel at the end of this meeting where you will get to basically, you guys are like the firing squad, right? Like ask these guys your real questions, tap into their expertise. And the best way that you can do that is by going ahead and scanning that Slido app that's on your tables. You can start putting questions in the queue that we'll be able to address in that panel. So if something comes up as we're chatting, you can go ahead and drop that question into the Slido app, and we'll be able to have those ready to rock and roll for our hour-long panel session to wrap up our day. So with that, Tommy, welcome. You're all the way here from Michigan.
Thanks, Peggy. Yeah, thank you. I guess I'll introduce myself a little bit.
Yes,
so Swisslane Farms is the name of our dairy, and I'm a fourth-generation dairyman in partnership with my brother Matt and my cousin Annie, and the senior generation of our dairy is my dad, and then Annie's dad Fred, my uncle, and then another uncle Jeff. In the last, we really started succession planning. They actually started succession planning back in like 2005, 2004. But our dairy was founded by my great-grandpa. He emigrated from Switzerland in the early 1900s, started working at the neighbor's dairy, fell in love with that guy's daughter and married her and bought the 90 acres next door, started milking one cow, and by I guess it'd be the 1980s, my dad was around 30 when him and my uncles took over the dairy from my grandpa. At the time, the dairy was worth about $300,000, so they carried a life insurance policy on my grandpa for the entirety of his life. When he passed, that was kind of what they shared with their off-farm siblings who did not know that was what was in the will. And some of them were mad. So in the early 2000s, when my dad and uncles, I was just getting done with college, and I had done an internship at a dairy in Michigan and came back home to be the night herdsman. And of course, I was college educated, now I'm a professional dairyman. And my dad and uncles didn't see it that way, rightly so. And so we were not getting along swimmingly. And I heard about that time they were working with, it was actually Salisbury Management at the time, and which was Mike Salisbury, Barb Dart, and Mike Fassler, and good group of people. But they kind of started putting together what they thought our generation should do. And at the same time, I heard from, I can't remember who the presenter was at a dairy conference in Michigan, and he said, if you're a young guy working for sweat equity with nothing in writing, I think we heard that today, you're taking an awful big risk. And I thought, well, that's me. And about the same time, in their transition succession plan, they started to drop some requirements, and we still have some of those requirements, but one of the requirements was that you work off the farm for a period of time. And so I took a job. My brother and I both took jobs. Matt actually worked with Steve at Egg Star, and I took a job at the local co-op selling feed, and thought, boy, I'll have this co-op sold out of feed in about 2 weeks. And I went to the first farm, the neighbor's farm, and realized I didn't even know we sold. And 6 months later, I called my professor at Michigan State, and I said, Joe, I am failing at this. Like, this is so hard. Like, these guys don't want to buy anything from me, right? Like, and rightly so. But 7 years later, I had made it in the nutrition and feed sales business and had a good career going. My brother was doing well at Egg Star, and our dairy was at 50% equity, just north of that. It's time, and they were doing. We had watched the 2000s were really good for a lot of dairymen, and my dad and uncles in particular. They were doing a great job, and we were watching them have a lot of fun. And we felt like, why are we helping all these other dairymen make money? We should go home and do that now. So we did. We built a 500 cow robot dairy together, which I think, hindsight's 2020. We wish we'd have done something different now, but I say that, but at the same time, that was something. I remember the day that my Uncle Jeff looked at me and said, are you going to quit your job and come manage these cows? Because I don't really need to milk any more cows. I got to tell my wife that I'm quitting my job. So I quit my job, and then I told my wife that I quit my job. Communication, right? Just don't do that. But that was in 2011, and that was something that was really good for us as a family, though, because we were able to lock arms, my dad, my uncles, my brother, my cousin, and I, and really build that together. We made a bunch of mistakes, but we still did it together, and I think it maybe was one of those things that maybe helped save our business, save relationships. So, yeah, that's kind of our story.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing a little bit of that background, Tom, of some of the progression of what it took to get to where you're at, which now, can you just take a moment and explain like the layers of leadership and the leadership team that you've established within Swisslane Farms, and also what happened to the dad and the uncles?
Yeah, so they are expert maple syrup manufacturers now. But so between 2010 and now, we've grown our business. So when I came back to the dairy, we were milking about 1,200-ish cows, and one double 16 parlor. Our home dairy is it's about 20 miles southeast of Grand Rapids. Great place to raise a family. It's and own real estate. But as we were looking at growth and working with Steve, and he likes to poo-poo all of our really good ideas. So we were looking at building, and he's like, hey, at the time, there's a lot of kind of aging dairymen out there. Maybe make a few phone calls before you build and just see if there's somebody who's looking for an exit strategy. So we called around, and I came across a guy that actually was another client of Steve's, and when my brother called, he was like, this is the phone call I've been praying for. And so we really feel like it was kind of a God-ordained thing, not just a lucky business move, I guess. And so we leased his dairy, and about the same time got the opportunity to lease a dairy 5 miles from there, which was a whole story. But anyways, so today we're milking about 5,600 cows. Those two dairies are about 30 miles from our home dairy. So we're milking 5,600 fairly inefficiently right now, and looking to build a milking parlor at the home dairy. My dad and uncles, we have essentially bought them out. We have bought them out, so they have not actually participated in the growth to Battle Creek. I've actually set up a separate entity that my brother and my cousin and I own that they have no ownership in. They were, we've got a lot of really good counsel along the way. I've realized, like you build this whole, your whole nest egg as a dairyman, and it's not as big as you think when it's time to transition it to the next, whether you sell it to a non-family member and take a haircut on taxes, or you give that discount to the next generation. But they're all happy. They maybe don't have it. I mean, I think in their minds, maybe they thought that someday they'd get a big wad of cash off the dairy. Like, the dairy was worth, when they sold it, I don't know, $12 million. So maybe they all thought they'd get $4 million. They're getting a check every month that covers, and it's a good check. And I would say that one of the most pivotal moments in the transition plan was the day that we took their salary to almost zero. Like, took their salary. They were at that time, they were still probably pulling in just in salary. We had decreased it some, but it was probably still close to $75,000, even though that was, and they were getting some transition payments, equity payments plus the salary. And we said, the bulk of your income needs to come from your equity. And that wasn't, we didn't tell them that, like, you're only getting this much money. It was advised to us. And that gave them permission to step away from leadership, right? And the other thing that I would say is those guys, to their credit, let us do a bunch of really dumb stuff. And it's the only way to learn, right? And we got ourselves in trouble. And there was a time, one of the questions you kind of asked me, like, what was a difficult situation, one of the most difficult situations that you were in? And we got ourselves, I can remember sitting around the table with Steve talking about, we always kind of look at, all right, this is how the last year's gone. This is kind of what we're looking at. We're like, all right, Steve, tell us what's in your crystal ball, right? And he's like, guys, this was like early 2015. He's like, I think it's going to be, the end of 2015 is going to be tough, but by then things should recover. Well, in Michigan, I don't know how many of you guys in Wisconsin are aware, but between 2015 and 2019 in Michigan, we had no processing, and we were sending you a lot of milk, and we were not making much money on it. So actually, we were not making money on it. And so we got ourselves, by 2018-ish, we owed the co-op a lot of money, the feed co-op a lot of money. And we were like, well, we can peck away at this for the next 15 years and take care of that, or get a loan to cover that, and or we can sell real estate. And the decision to sell real estate to cover bad debt was excruciating. And then, we're in a small town like a lot of you, and when what happens, you sell a couple 100 acres of real estate, everybody kind of knows what's going on, right? That dairy is on its way out. And it was tough. And convincing my dad and uncles to sell their prized possession, it was hard. Yeah. But thank goodness they let us do it.
And that's why you're able to still be doing what you're doing today, and on a growth trajectory, a forward movement. But it all comes back to those hard conversations. And that was a strategic move that you guys made. But you've mentioned a little bit, Tommy, here about kind of some of the structural stuff that you guys had to do to make a transition. But I want to go back to revisit, kind of reflecting on what Elaine shared earlier this morning when it comes to having these hard conversations. And so even in that example, right, of having to convince the older generation to let go of real estate, is there anything that really stands out in your mind about some of those conversations? And, maybe it was one of the hardest parts, or maybe it was something that you guys were able to do to move through? Like, how did you have that conversation and get to a resolution?
Yeah, I think as I think about that, like before we signed the papers, they had a list of expectations for us, right? And Christy, maybe you remember some of these, but like one of them made sense. It was like, know what's in the books. Okay, I'd like to know what's in the books too. The other one was no more than 45 minutes for lunch. That was very important to them. And that was 2. The third one was the dairy comes before hunting and fishing. Those were their 3 main requirements for our generation to come back to the dairy, right? Which in essence means we want you to work like we've worked, right? And we all kind of signed up for that. And we were like, oh, that's not that big a deal. Well, what is a big deal is my mom and neither of my aunts ever had a job off the dairy, right? My wife, my brother's wife, and my cousin's husband all make more money than we do, right? And so it changes the dynamic, right? And so when you have a spousal partnership where your spouse makes more money than you better not come home and say, I'm not doing any laundry or dishes. And I hope the kids are ready for bed. And, so our lifestyles were very different. And so while we had to balance, putting in the hours that that were satisfactory to them, it was also like establishing our generation's way of life. Because let's face it, my generation is not going, it's one of the reasons that dairies are exiting is because my generation, there's a lot of my generation whose wives or husbands make more money than they do or an equal amount or work 40 hours off the farm, right? And so our lifestyle just is different. And so it was a lot of negotiation, if you will. And, but we were able to get through that. But we kind of had to, one of the things that I don't know if it was Christy who told us, Christy was very, I guess, influential in our transition plan and not just the plan, I would say more in the execution of the relationship and the negotiation between the generations. And I think she told us, like, it's okay for there to be conflict between the generations, but within a generation, you better darn well be well aligned, like solidly aligned. So my brother and my cousin and I were like, well, if we're going to have this fight, let's have it together. We better be on the same team, right? And so I think that was really a big deal.
So what does it take? What did it take to get aligned in your generation with your brother and your cousin?
Oh, we met. We still do. I mean, it was every week. Being very intentional about being together and talking about things that, and those, like today, our conversations are more about the next generation, but in those early days, like how are we navigating this transition plan and how are we keeping those guys happy? And yeah.
And Tommy, one last question, and then we'll be moving over to our other panelists here. So the transition's a process, right? And it's not ever truly done because now you're planning for the next. But when you look at the generational transition from your dad and uncles to you, your brother, and your cousin, is there anything that you wish you guys could have done or would have done differently?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think there's times when we wish we would have gotten help earlier. You think you can kind of have some of those conversations and get through them, but I remember we probably brought Christy in because we were in crisis, not because we were like, oh, this is going great. It was like, we're not getting along and we need some coaching. And so I think having that coaching early on. And honestly, that I can tell that story about bringing help. My brother worked alongside Steve in his professional career, so he thought, I can do all this myself. We got back, and then I did nutrition for a lot of other farms, and I thought, surely I can do our own nutrition, right? We should have, the day we came back to the dairy, we should have hired professionals in those fields, because we both screwed a bunch of stuff up trying to run the dairy and do those things, and it didn't work out that great.
So thank you for your authenticity and your honesty, Tommy, about the challenges of the process, but even the challenges in your generation, but also communicating with the senior generation. However, at the end of the day, you're able to be here and be part of a partnership and a leadership team that is moving a family farming business forward. And that, Tommy, is a victory. And I hope that your family can celebrate that as you keep moving forward in those ways. And there's a lot more, Tommy, that we're going to get into when we have our full panel hour at the end of our session today. But please, again, you can use that Slido app that's right there on your tables. Because there's probably a few questions stirring in your head of, how did this work or how did that work in the Swisslane's transition? And so please go ahead and you can put those into the Slido. And so, Tommy, I'm going to have you can go back to your seat for a little while, but don't go too far because you'll be back up here shortly.
This was just one of the transition talks recorded at the Farm Forward Conference held last month at the Farm Wisconsin Discovery Center in Newton, Wisconsin. A big thank you to all of our panelists: Will McKinley of Menn Law, Tommy Oesch of Swisslane Farms, Christy Pagel of Leading Edge Consulting, and Steve Bodart of AgriGrowth Solutions for sharing their expertise on the legal, financial, and communication side of family farm transition. If today's conversation sparked ideas for your own farm, stay tuned. We will be releasing a full hour-long panel episode later this week, featuring all of these experts, plus family farm coach Elaine Fraze. Also, thank you to all of our sponsors for the Farm Forward Conference, including Zoetis, CP Feeds, CMEX, Nicolet National Bank, Greenstone Farm Credit, Central Star, and Valley Vet, as well as AgriGrowth Solutions, Menn Law, and Leading Edge Consulting.